particularly appropriate about Tim Cook being our pace setter today, given our history together and the role that you're playing. We're talking about innovating with purpose. We'll get to innovating. I'd like to start with purpose. One of the most interesting data points in the evidence about a global collapse in trust in institutions is evidence of a rise in trust in business leaders to fill a vacuum. And increasingly, you and your peers are being valued on your values, whether it's about labor regulation or sustainability or privacy or saving our schools. And so I'm curious to hear you talk a little about how you're navigating that landscape of expectation.
It's been an interesting time period to be a CEO. I've always deeply felt that people should have values. A corporation is nothing more than a collection of people, and therefore, by extension, a corporation should have values. And so it's not something unique for Apple in a way. We've always had a set of things that were really important to us and that we felt said something about us. And part of that is the way we treat the environment. A part of that is of evangelizing and advocating for high-quality public education. And privacy. Before anybody was talking about privacy, right? This has been at the depths of who we are as a company. And I tend to think as I look at the world today, the issues that we face cannot be addressed solely by government. We should not be looking for government to solve all the problems. I think it takes the public sector, the private sector, and academia kind of working together to solve some of these huge problems. Climate change is not going to be solved by government. It's just one example, right? And so we readily step up and participate in the conversations, and because we think that how we do what we do says as much about us as what we do.
But so I'm curious, given the remarkably polarized moment we find ourselves in nationally and in many cases globally, how do you navigate that when you're in the territory, whether it's around the environment or around education, where you also have customers, you have suppliers, you have all sorts of stakeholders, you have shareholders. How do you figure out how to avoid the minefields while having an impact?
You focus on, or what I do, I'm not sure this is the right thing, but I focus on what's right and decide that first, and then it's more about what you do. The issues that we weigh in on are issues we feel like we have standing. And by standing, I mean that we have a legitimate, unique position or lens on the issue, that we have something of value to say, that we're not just a talking head, right? That we're just not adding to the, giving an opinion, so to speak. And so things that we feel like we have a unique lens are things like immigration, things like education, things like the environmental protection, things like privacy, things that are in the human rights area. I mean, these things are incredibly important to our employees. We are a company of immigrants. We have 300 plus people that are in the United States on DACA. And so these issues are deeply personal for us. And I think that I would hope that every CEO would stand up and represent their employees. And yes, at the end of the day, you do upset some people when you do this. But I try not to get wrapped up in a pretzel about who we upset, because I think at the end of the day, not in the thick of the moment, but at the end of the day, we'll be judged more by did we stand up for what we believed in, not necessarily Do they agree with me on everything? And I think still people appreciate that, even when they do disagree. And you know, we've taken some unpopular positions, I recognize that, but we do them out of believing deeply that they're right and that we have a unique lens. We focus on policies, not politics. We do not focus on politics. And I recognize that everything kind of, unfortunately these days, tends to break down in that way. But we focus on the policy itself, not the politics. You know, Apple, this is probably not known to a lot of people in here, but Apple doesn't have a PAC. Apple's probably the only large company, I would think, or one of the very few that doesn't have a PAC. I refuse to have one because it shouldn't exist, right? This should not. I think the people that should be able to donate are people that can vote, right? And we should set a limit about what that is, and maybe it's the current limits, maybe it's a different limit, and it should be transparent. And so I never have donated any money to a PAC personally. Every donation I've ever made is public. And so it can stand the public scrutiny. People can decide whether they like it or they don't like it. And I do that for my personal self, not for the company. The company donates zero to political candidates.
So, well, speaking of companies upsetting people, I'm curious about how you would grade your fellow technology leaders who, depending on the audience, are either in the process of saving liberal democracy or sinking it.
I think that there's some serious issues with tech. And I think that even though I am deeply a free market person in mindset and believe that some unexpected things can happen in regulation, I think that we all have to be intellectually honest. And we have to admit that what we're doing isn't working. And that technology needs to be regulated. There are now too many examples where the no rails have resulted in a great damage to society. And when things are out in society and they don't represent the true cost, then you have to do something about it. You either have to reflect it from a cost point of view so that you're valuing things properly, or you have to regulate it. And so I think that I've been on the regulation kick, which surprised even me, for a while, because I didn't see companies laying the basic rails in place and then refusing to step over those. And so I think that's where we are.
When you watch congressional hearings on any of the technology-related topics, how confident are you in the likelihood of us being able to come to a system of smart regulation as opposed to dumb or destructive regulation?
I'm not confident, is the short version of the statement. I think this is an example where Europe is more likely to come up with something. The GDPR isn't ideal, but GDPR was a step in the right direction. And this is on the privacy side, obviously. I don't think it's a save-all, end-all. I think there's plenty of things it didn't do that it needs to do. But I think it's a step in the right direction, and it may be that sort of the center of gravity in moving the ball forward in privacy may be in Europe, and that it may eventually come to the US. I think in some cases, and I'm a part of this problem in some way personally, in the US, we typically either, business thinks all regulation is bad regulation. And therefore, there's lots of gravity around not doing something. And I think that's a very difficult tide to work through here. But I am hopeful, and we are advocating strongly for regulation, because I do not see another path. at this point.
So one of the last times you and I talked, you were in the middle of a fight with the Justice Department over privacy and over the right to break into an iPhone. Where do you see the focus of the privacy fight now? Because it's moved a long way.
It has. I think privacy at this point is much more meaningful to mainstream Americans now. Privacy started being an esoteric kind of thing. And people that I would talk to, if they were in the military, they really got it because they fought for our civil liberties, and they knew how important that civil liberties were to the definition of American. And so they got it. The libertarians kind of got it. But when it started getting out into the mainstream America, a lot of people didn't really grasp it. I think now there's been so many events that it's much more meaningful to the everyday American about what is happening. And I think when it begins to affect our democracy and so forth, it means even more, and you get a more visceral response. So I think the subject has come a long way in America. But I still think that all of us, including Apple, have to continually talk about what it means to the user, what it means to the citizen, why this is important, why the folks that wrote our Constitution thought it was so important, and how important it is to expression. And because in the world where everything is totally open, people begin to guard what it is they will say. And think about where society goes if we're afraid to tell each other our opinions, if we're afraid somebody's listening or watching or monitoring, or we're under surveillance. So this is a bad thing inherently in a very broad way, not to mention the manipulation that can go on with pitting different groups against each other. However, I'm still worried that some of the tools like encryption, our battle was over, could the government force Apple to create a tool that would have put hundreds of millions of people at risk in order to get into a phone? And we took the position, no, the law does not support the government having the authority to do that. And I wish that case would have gone to court, to be honest. It was dropped the day before, and now after the Inspector General reports have come out, our worst fears have been confirmed that it was a very rigged case to begin with. And so I think this was not the government's finest hour. I have personally never seen the government apparatus move against a company like it did here in a very dishonest manner. And so I felt like the naive guy that thought things like this didn't happen, that they would try to prevent a discussion, a dialogue, a debate going on about this. I hope that we've advanced much further than that. It hasn't reoccurred, and it's occurred in no other country in the world, which made me that much more disappointed by the way that it happened in our country. But I do think for the everyday American, privacy is materially more important sitting here today in 2019 than it was when we were going through that case.
When it comes to the power of government to individually target companies, this is something we have still seen in different versions in the last couple of years. So, Tim Apple, I'm curious what you could tell us that might surprise us that you've seen and heard in your dealings with the president.
I would never talk about conversations that I've had with the president, because regardless of who the president is, I would not do that because I don't think it's proper to do that. The things that I'm passionate about as a leader of Apple is getting DACA fixed getting the immigration system working for America, including sort of fixing these green card backlogs. We have people that are in 90-plus year backlogs on green cards. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's essentially a lifetime, more than a lifetime for too many people. You know, trade is very important. So I think it's good for America, and I think we have to figure out how it's good for everyone, not just a set of people in America, but good for everyone. I'm passionate about education. And
well, I was interested in your recent visit with the Workforce Summit, that half of your U.S. employees do not have four-year college degrees.
Yeah, it's, you know, what I think I said then and what I've always felt like is when your founder doesn't have one, it kind of says a lot about what people can do without a college education. And I think fundamentally we have, as a society, gotten too much ingrained in what is the pedigree, what is the degree, all of this kind of stuff, and lost sight of the humanity in the conversation a bit. And so we're out pushing on things like this. We're out pushing on getting every kid to learn coding. We're out pushing.
Do you think that should be like a requirement?
I do. I think every kid in America, or in the world actually, should learn to code. Because I think it's the most important second language you can learn. It's a global language, and there's no such thing in the world. It's the only one. And it's a way to express yourself, whether your passion is in the sciences or the arts. It's a way to express yourself. And I think software is sort of touching our lives everywhere. And so I'm not saying everybody needs to become a programmer. I'm saying, like the basics of mathematics and history and so forth, it's a core skill that kids need to have. And equally important in our view is creativity skills. Creativity, as math and science has been recognized as being very important, unfortunately the arts have been gutted from too many of our schools. And so basic creativity skills are not taught in a lot of schools. So we've designed our own curriculum called Everyone Can Create. And we've made it available to all public school, or all schools actually, in the world. And many, many schools are now picking this up. It's a way to integrate creativity and the core subjects that they are still teaching, math, science, history, and language, et cetera.
That points to one of the things that is often true of Time 100s, that they end up being on our list not for whatever they first achieved, what first brought them wealth or fame or celebrity or importance, but a second or third act. So I'm curious about why you say Apple might one day be most known as a health company.
Yeah, we started pulling this string many, many years ago now. First, as the run-up to the watch, as it was being created, we began to recognize that it was a big idea to monitor your body on a real-time basis versus just going to the doctor once a year and having different vital signs checked. And so with the watch, we focused initially on wellness and heart. And we last year, as you know, we launched the Series 4 that has an EKG in it. And this is a huge thing because you have the ability to monitor an EKG. Some people only have one of these in their life. Some people have none. Most people in the world have none. And so all of a sudden on a device that's on your wrist, you can monitor EKG. I'm getting tons of notes from all the different countries that we've launched in saying, oh my God, I found out I had this serious problem. I have AFib, I didn't know it. I went to the doctor, he or she told me I would have died if I wouldn't have known this, or would have had a serious issue or something. I mean, this is what the people are telling me. And so I think it's a big idea to monitor your body. And as we pull this string more, we recognize more and more things that we can do, uniquely do. With Stanford, we just ran the largest heart study in the world ever. We had 400,000 people in it. Think about the way these studies have been run. In the past, you'd go to a bulletin board, there would be little phone numbers stuck on it, and you'd pull a phone number off, and it'd take forever to get any kind of the number of people to join a study. Now, all of a sudden, you can have hundreds of thousands in a study. It's amazing. And as long as you have the technology and privacy, it's even more important when you get into the health kind of arena. If you're really solid on these things, we think that you can increase the learning cycles and be able to make significant contributions to healthcare over time. And so we're at the early stages of this with the watch, and obviously we're working on a bunch more things. And I do think that there will be a day that we will look back and say, Apple's greatest contribution to mankind has been in healthcare. I think that will happen.
Maybe the corollary to that, you could say it's about our mental health, is that there's one study that I think said that we typically touch our screens 2,167 times a day.
Well, you shouldn't be doing that.
Well, so exactly, although you competing interests here, but you introduced screen time,
yeah,
which I wondered whether, one, you think you have an addiction problem, or that we collectively do, or how we should be thinking about, and what led you to introduce that, because of this extraordinary relationship we have with devices that you were, very responsible for making as compelling as they are.
We think that, we know because they've told us that some users primarily focused on their kids, feel their kids are using their devices too much. However, as we look at it, it's also the parent that's using them too much, right? We all are, or many of us are. And so what we wanted to do, Apple has never wanted to maximize user time. We've never been about that. We're not motivated to do that from a business point of view, and we're certainly not motivated from a values point of view. What we want to do is give you a tool that empowers you to do things you couldn't do otherwise. We want to enable things for your life and empower you to have experiences that you couldn't have. It is clear that there are certain apps that people can get in the mindset of just scrolling through mindlessly and continually picking up their phones and looking to see, what is happening right at this second or whatever. And so what we did was we looked at this and said, okay, number one, we should make sure people know what they're doing. Because there's a human trait in all of us to underestimate the degree of something bad we're doing. If you ask somebody how many calories they had yesterday, I bet they're going to say less than they had. If they ask you how much exercise you did, they'll probably overestimate it. And so what we're doing is we're giving people the facts. Here's how much time you spent, and here's what you spent it on. Here's how many times you picked up your phone yesterday. And here's how many notifications you got. And what it's done for me, and if you guys aren't doing this, if you have an iPhone and you're not doing it, I would encourage you to really do this, is monitor these. And what it has done for me personally is I've gone in and gutted the number of notifications. Because I really asked myself, do I really need to be getting thousands of notifications a day?
Or is that making you crazy?
Yeah, maybe that's the reason. But it's not something that is adding value to my life or is making me a better person. And so I went in and chopped that. And the number of this thing, well, every time you pick up your phone, it means you're taking your eyes off whoever you're dealing with or talking with, right? And if you're looking at your phone more than you're looking in somebody else's eyes, you're doing the wrong thing. Yeah, you're doing the wrong thing. And so we want to educate people about what they're doing, and this thing will improve through time, just like everything else that we do. We'll innovate there as we do in other areas, and but basically, we don't want people using their phones all the time. This has never been an objective for us. And yeah.
Well, this will be, as today unfolds and in the face of all the temptation, this will be a challenge to all of us to keep our eyes on
Yeah.
what we're hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim,
Thank
for
you.
what you've shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.